Hey everyone, my name is Matt. Welcome to my shop and welcome back to my series on building this Serpentine chest of drawers. This time we're going all the way down here to the bottom and we're going to make the base, which is Serpentine, just like the rest of the case. We have a frame, we have Ogee bracket feet, which the front ones happen to be curved, and then we have a transition molding here, which also, of course, follows that Serpentine curve along the front. Again, I want to say a big thank you to Triton Tools for sponsoring the series and continue to support the channel as they have for the last several years. This time, we're going to be taking a closer look at the oscillating spindle and belt sander. We'll be doing that later on, but for now, we're gonna make some templates because that's basically all this project is. Templates. The first template I need is an exact copy of the bottom of the case. I traced the curve onto the MDF and marked the extents of the case so later I can put it back in the same place for routing after cutting away the waste at the bandsaw. Now I need to extend the curve past where the case ends. I still have my drawing bow set for when I came up with the Serpentine curve, so I can use it to extend the line. If you want to make this project a bit easier, extend the curve with a straight line so you're not trying to miter pieces together along a curve. I think having the curve extend all the way to the extent of the base is just more elegant. After flush trimming as much as I can start blending the new area into the curve. I added some pencil lines on the flush trimmed area so I can make sure as I'm working that I'm not touching any of that. Now this is my master template and I can start making the offset template, which will become the outside edge of the base. I want the base to be 1 1/6 inches bigger than the case. I don't have a single bit and bushing combo to get there in one go, so I'll do it in 2. The first pass is done with a 1/4 inch bit and a 2-inch bushing, which gives me an offset of 7/8 of an inch. This gives me an intermediate template, which is, surprise, 7/8 of an inch offset from the original. The next setup is a 3/8 inch bit with a 3/4 inch bushing, giving me an offset of 3/16. This will be the final template which we'll use on the frame, which we'll make next. Construction of the frame is pretty simple. The front corners are mitered with the sides running all the way to the back. The sides then get connected with a piece of secondary material in the back. So we finally have our frame is ready to go. We can start getting it shaped and getting it attached to the case. So I have my offset template here. I can use that onto the frame here. We'll get it traced out and get the waist cut away at the bandsaw. And then we'll get this template stuck down to the frame and route the actual profile onto here to get that curvature. And then from there, we can go ahead and add the edge profiling. So on the bottom side, this easy one, just a quick round over. And then on the top, we have the classical profile. So we'll go ahead and make that one go around the perimeter as well. The only fun little trick here is on the back side of the frame, we'll add a little bit of a waist block. That way we don't have to worry about going around the corner and cutting in deeper on the back corner of that frame. We can go all the way past it, remove that block, and we don't have to worry about messing up that back corner. So there is the completed transition frame, and I have to tell you, this is actually my 3rd attempt at making this component. Having a heck of a day doing this thing. So the first one I made with the sides a 1/4 inch too short, so it was a little too small for the case. It's like no big deal. I just cut the sides off and kept the front and made new sides. And there's this one here. The issue with that was I second guessed myself when I went into this. I had originally figured I need to create the angles on here at the miter that the curve creates, not at a 45, but I second guessed myself. I haven't went through the work of filming how I approximated the angle of the curve at that corner intersection joint, and then how to bisect that with a set of dividers and get the new actual miter angles. But second guessed myself and just ignored it. So this is the new final one. It is done. The miter angle here on the side piece is at 54 degrees, and then the miter angle on the front piece is at 36 degrees. Let's put it on the case. And hopefully it fits. So I'm just gonna throw it on the case, get it lined up, and just screw it to the underside. We'll permanently attach it later, but for now the screws will allow me to remove it as we kind of move forward with things. So with the transition frame out of the way, next we're going to start working on the Ogee bracket feet, which will go underneath the frame and support the whole case. So here's the setup for you. So I went back to the original picture and I got some kind of zoomed in pictures of things to kind of guide my process as I create these feet. I'm not trying to duplicate this piece perfectly, but this should give me a good starting point. So this is the front right corner of the piece, and I have manipulated this image to kind of flatten it and to fix the distortion based on the curvature of the case and everything else that's going on. So this is how it was in the actual picture, and I have modified things to get it a little more straight on, since we are looking down on it, and this is a curved surface too, so that kind of gives us this area. Now on the other side of the case, the left side of the case, that picture gave us a really good profile view of the front curve. This part up here, not so much, but this is perfect. So this is the curve I'm going to use for the front of the foot. I'm going to combine that with this ornamentation part in over here. So this first area here, this is a bit of a shadow line here. So this curve actually comes right around here, and it's not perfect right now because this is still distorted. This should be usually, or at least I'll be doing it as a circle segment. So this will be drilled with a drill bit, and then the curves will come off of that, and this little nubbin thing comes off of that curve right there. So this part through here is a semicircle. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to shorten up this little bottom area here. I don't like this heavy foot area, so I'm going to probably take that down in half a little bit, but this is all templating time anyway. So I got some scissors, I got some MDF. We're going to make a first version template, and then we can always tweak things from there. The nice thing about making templates and working with MDF is it's pretty easy to shape and change and start over and everything. So I'm just going to step through this process, and we'll see how this foot template ends up looking. So somewhat surprisingly, I'm actually really happy with this first iteration of this leg. So I'm going to move forward with this as my template. so with my stock all prepped, now I'm ready to start working on the profile section of the, I guess the Ogee kind of profile on it, that the curvy bit if you look at the end of the board. So I've transferred the profile from the foot onto the end of the board, so I have something to start with, and I'm going to do the big cove first. I'm doing it here at the table saw by running the board diagonally across the blade, which is, it makes an absolute mess, but it works really well. So the setup for this is, it's not super precise because you're doing a lot of eyeballing. So basically you lay your board on the table and you just kind of get it in somewhat of a rough position, and you sight down across the table past the blade and look at your cut line on the board and kind of envision the blade removing that material, and that kind of gets you in the right place. Once you've figured out the position left to right and the angle that the workpiece needs to be at, you can attach a fence to your table, and that's going to be what we're going to guide the board across. You have a few actual variables you can play with. It's going to be the angle of the fence, the position of the fence, and the angle of the blade. If you have a perfectly symmetrical curve, that blade is going to be at 90, but if you want a little bit of an asymmetrical curve, like I have here, I think it's asymmetrical. It looks asymmetrical when I line the blade up with the blade tilted a little bit. Then you have the blade tilted, you can make some kind of asymmetrical curve. So I have a blade tilted at, we got 9 degrees right now, and this is at somewhere around 45. I don't know. The nice thing about this is we have a lot of material to remove. We're going to be raising the blade very slowly, so we can make adjustments as we go. If it looks like the curve we're creating is a little bit off, we can make an adjustment, and it's not going to be a big deal. So we're going to raise the blade about 1/16 of an inch at a time, run the board across there until we get down to the line. So I'll make a few passes and see where things end up. If we need to make any adjustments along the way, we will do that as we go. Okay, so that made a mess. But you can see we're pretty close. We got the curve here pretty well dialed in. We have a little bit of material here to knock out. That's what I'm going to do next. These little areas are just going to be with the fence and a saw blade, just kind of moving the fence and tipping the blade to remove as much of that waste as possible. We'll have a little bit of blending and cleanup work to do once these feet are actually made, but the machines take care of the bulk of the shaping work at this step. These are gonna look pretty nice. I'm pretty happy with the way these are going so far. Okay, so there is our stock ready to rock and roll. We'll do some more final shaping later on. I'm gonna start by making the rear feet since they are kind of the easiest. So I'm gonna pull the 2 rear feet from this area down here. I'll have this kind of really cool crotchy figure here for that back corner. And then I'll have, some more normal stuff for the other back corner, and then the other 2 front side legs will be more of a straight green, which will end up matching what I'll probably end up doing for the front of the case. So I'm just going to go ahead and just start cutting these things out. So I will just block off a couple of chunks here, and then the pattern gets just laid out from the back side. We'll drill the through hole and cut the profile out. The rear feet, again, do not get the S-curve on the, I guess, the front or what would be the back of the case. That's just going to be a simple square cut, and we'll end up just doing a little bit of dovetail work there to create a little bracket for the back. So as we're cutting out the profile on those feet, let's take a closer look at Triton's oscillating belt and spindle sander. A combination machine like this is great because it allows you a lot of flexibility in just one machine. So you're able to do concave curves with the individual spindles, and with the belts you're able to do convex curves as well as flat work. The spindles go from 2" down to 1/2 inch, and they're all stored nicely here on the front of the machine. If you happen to need a bigger size spindle, the end of the belt here is 3" and this end down here is 1.5 inches. So you can actually do some spindle sanding type operations with the belt attachment on here. Swapping the belt to the spindles is actually pretty quick too. Just this one little fastener comes out of the top of the belt. This whole assembly slides right off. There is an insert plate that's stored in the back of the machine. That drops on here. You can pick whatever size spindle you want to use. Drop this guy on here. Throw on a little washer. Another nice feature is the table does tilt, so if you wanted to sand something at an odd angle, you can do that as well. So that's a quick look at Triton's oscillating spindle and belt sander, a great tool to have for any kind of curved work. So next we're going to make some dovetails for the rear brackets of those rear feet. Before I test this fit, I'm just going to make sure that my sockets are good before I go too crazy. I'll make sure that the bottom and then the back wall is either undercut or square. Let's see how we did. Feels pretty good. Be a little tight. Bigger hammer. Okay, a little snug and not quite my best work, but you know, for the back of a case, this little gap there isn't really a huge deal. So let's work on finalizing the shaping of the bracket foot. With the back piece installed, it becomes really easy to hold this thing. And now we can work on the final shaping. I'm going to do this first little bit, all of this convex stuff just with the plane. I have my guidelines here. So I'm going to come all the way from here all the way to this little peak thing. So I'm doing this 6-inch long segment. Then as we get to this side, it's the whole, was it like 8 inches long? So I want to watch my line as I'm working. And as I'm doing my strokes, I want to make sure I get all the way through. I don't want to stop here because that's going to make the profile down here different than up here. And we're just making a bunch of facets. So I'm just arbitrarily tipping the plane to grab like the high spot as I'm going. Almost there. In this case, the line is the waist area. So we want to remove the line. Okay, I think that's pretty good. I'm going to leave this little corner here. I'm going to have it transition to flat for this much material instead of just bringing it back down. I think this curve here is pretty nice the way it is. So next, down here. So on this profile, you can see the bottom of the foot's actually going to be a little bit lower, or I guess stick out less far from the case than the top of the curve. So that's why this shaping is done now, because this is going to get rid of our flat reference. So this face is no longer going to be parallel to the underside, which is something we needed when we were doing the drilling and the shaping operation, or the profile operation. Okay, so that's the bottom. Now we'll get rid of this corner area here. It's getting a little tight. I'm gonna go to a block plane. All right, that block plane is not sharp enough for this. I got some nice figure and curl in this foot. So we're gonna go back to this guy. A little more awkward. And the grain shift back here is causing me to have to stop short because I'm blowing out the backside. Because the grain is presented to the surface like this. Instead of coming this way, it's going like that. Not a big deal though. Okay, we got just a little bit of material back here now. Hit that with a rasp. Okay, now I have to clean up the table saw cove area, the gooseneck scraper. So that's really about it for the rough shaping, and now we'll go for some final finessing, and that's just going to be a lot of sanding. So I'm going to start at 100 grit and probably work up to 150 for now. That'll leave me with 180 grit to do later when I'm in the mood. And that takes care of a rear foot, and if you look at that, you got the other side here too. So kind of important, making a pair. I've made the mistake before, making two the same. Do not do that. So these are pretty much done as far as roughing out goes. They still need all their edges broken and a little bit of finesse work done. And the last little bit on this is going to be to clip the back piece here. So I have an angle drawn on here. I'm just going to go ahead and just make that cut, plane it smooth, and then these will be done, and we can move on to the front feet, which would be far more interesting. So before I dive into the probable insanity of the front section of the front feet, I'm going to take care of the side of the front feet, the side part, this one here, because those are pretty easy and they're basically the same as the back ones, with the only difference being that the front is going to be mitered versus being dovetailed in the back feet. So I'm going to again make a left and right foot using my template, and the process for most of this is going to be exactly the same as we did on the back. I will get the profile transferred on there and then go through the process of getting the shape cut out, and then I'll go through and make the mitered cuts. Those miters are going to be at the same angle as the sides of the transition frame, and then once that's taken care of, I can go through and do the final shaping. And then once that profile is cut out, again, just like the rear foot, I'll go through and do the final profile shaping. And then the only last little detail on these is going to be to miter them, and that miter angle is going to be the same miter angle we used on the transition frame on the side pieces. These are pretty easy and pretty standard. The front part of these feet are going to be a lot more interesting because they are going to be curved, they're going to be profiled, and they're going to be shaped. All kinds of weird stuff. So because I already finished the shaping and profiling on this before I cut the miters, I had to glue this little piece of material back on here to keep it at the same level as up here for reference. So I'm just going to knock that off real quick. And it's one of the side front feet. Okay, so let's make the front ones now. So I have the rest of that slab that I got the other feet out of, and I'm going to use this section here for the front feet. This is a separate piece of stock because I need a lot more thickness to make up those front ones, because before we cut any of the profile in it, we're going to cut the front of the cabinet into the feet. So those will have like a curve in it. So we need more thickness. So I'm just going to go through and chop up this piece of slab and get our rough stock kind of situated for those front feet. So I have my stock here all milled up, and it is sitting at 232. So what I want to do is see how much thickness I'm actually going to need to get this curve cut in here, because that's not going to be thick enough. So if I take my 2 feet and put them together, I can put them, I got my ruler. I can put them in here. I can line up this side foot with the side of the transition frame, bring the corner in, and then I can come over to this foot here and measure how far back this thing is right now. And it is maybe 5/8 or so, maybe 3/4. So I need to add at least that to whatever thickness that this is right now. These are 1 3/4 thick, so I need to at least make my blank, 2 3/8, 2.5 inches thick. So I'm going to add some material to the back face of the front leg stock. That way the material stays the same thickness as we cut that curve out. So I have a quick miter cut here on the stock, and I want to just double check my thickness before I take it down to final thickness. The reference for this is going to be all on the inside face, so I want to make sure that I have, the right amount of material, because if I have too much from the back, I could scoop into the glue seam back here as I'm making this kind of cove here. So I don't want that. So I'm going to set this thing up as I had it kind of previously with the other foot, get it aligned. So something like that, and I have my template here to know how much material I'm actually going to need for the total length. So up to about here. So what I want to do now is keep this foot in place and slide the front foot forward. So now it's flush there, but I know for the top area where it's going to be touching the case, this steps back 5/8 of an inch from the high spot here. So I want to come forward another 5/8 of an inch. Okay, right around there. And if I come around to this side, I can see where my profile is going to end up, because I have my foot here, which is going to show me exactly, and I am past the glue seam by a little bit. So we have that much room to play with without actually contacting that glue seam. So we have this much material back here, which is going to be extra. And I think to make this a little bit less risky, what I'm going to do is just go ahead and work with it as is, and then we'll flush up the material in the back later on so it all kind of matches up nicely. Up here it doesn't matter because you're never going to see that, but what I'm trying to avoid is some kind of weird step on the underside of the case where you'll actually be able to see it. So if this is on here like that, if you're looking in from this way, you'd be able to see the step here. So I want these to come to a perfect intersection underneath the case. So the curves in these front feet really, I think, elevate this piece quite a bit. And these worked out pretty well. Not really all that hard to do, which is very refreshing. Not a whole lot of surface area to really shape to the profile. So these went relatively quickly for like how kind of weird they are. So from here, we're going to get these things all finished up to be connected together. So if I pull these guys out of here, you can still see I have extra material here on the curved foot. So I need to remove that material from the backside, get them to the same thickness right there at that miter, and then I can start getting the joinery together for this thing. I'm guessing that these are going to need some tweaking on the miter joints, so I'll tweak the miter joints and then cut in some floating tenons to join together. And then from there, it's a little bit more shaping. So you want to do your absolute final shaping once the feet are connected together and glued together and assembled. That way you can make sure that that miter line between the two feet is super crisp and really, really nice. So just about done with the shaping on these, and then we can talk about getting these things attached to the transition frame. So that takes care of all 4 feet. They're ready to go on and get glued to the underside of the transition frame. One thing I did to all the feet is I lapped the top surface. It is very likely and common that this surface here is not flat, which will make it hard to attach to the frame. So I just took these to the table saw, put a piece of sandpaper down on the table, and just kind of rub them around to get rid of all the high spots and get the whole top face of the feet into a single plane, so they will just sit down nicely onto the frame. So I'm gonna go pretty easy on the glue. Don't need to go overboard here. I don't want any squeeze out towards the front, so I will hold the glue back from the front edge a little bit just to make sure I don't have any squeeze out between the frame and the foot. And then these are just gonna be essentially rub joint. So I'll just set them down onto the frame, rub them around to get a little suction going from the glue, and just position them exactly where they need to be. The feet are held back from the edge of the frame a little bit, so you have a bit of a shadow line. So essentially there is there's a roundover on the underside of the frame, and there is a curve on the foot. So I want the curve on the foot to be behind the roundover on the frame. And I'll leave these alone for a little bit, and then we'll come back and reinforce them with the glue blocks. All 4 feet are now glued on, or at least they're sitting there waiting for the glue to dry. So while the glue is doing its thing on there, I'm going to raid the scrap bin and cut off a bunch of this stuff into glue blocks. So this is a great traditional way to get rid of some scraps. So these can go for back here, and then I've got some that I'm starting for the front here. I'm going to put this angle on here. Now with these ones we can be a little more sloppy and generous with the glue, since we are on the underside of the case, which is unseen. This is all just structural. Doesn't really matter if there's squeeze out back here. Although I did notice this. I'm about to cover one of my holes, so I gotta knock that corner off real quick. That would have been funny. Go and install it. Can't get the screw in. Luckily those screws are just there so I can get this realigned to the case. But that'd be pretty funny still. Okay, that one's good. So in the back here, because I have a space, I'm going to continue layering on some blocks and just kind of building up that corner. Normally you see this done in the front and the back, but my front feet are pretty narrow, so I'm not going to be able to do this as easily, which is fine. This is a not This is not a big piece of furniture. Like if this was a secretary desk with a bookcase on top, which is 7 feet tall, that's quite a bit bigger piece of furniture than this is. Then I'd worry about it. This is just a chest of drawers, so it's not very big. You'd also see these blocks built all the way up and then protruding a little bit past the foot, so you would have the actual weight of the piece of furniture on the blocks instead of on the actual feet, which is another way of doing this. You can see up here I'm alternating the grain direction, so that way I have my long grain connection between every other layer to the feet or the bracket. So there actually ends up being like a lot of meat behind these legs, but it's all scrap. Okay, I changed my mind a little bit because I'm feeling a little over the top. There's another glue block for this corner. And then here is another one. It's helping me empty out my scrap bin. That's all I care about. Fewer scraps in the bin. Either I burn them or I glue them to the bottom of a piece of furniture. So this is looking like it's ready to go on. We're going to do glue along the front, and then in the back I have some holes drilled, and they have an oversized hole through them. So the screw I put down there has a little bit of wiggle room that allows the case to float in and out underneath the backside of the base. So let's do it. We got a little glue in the front there, and we can pop our screws in from before, which will bring it into the correct orientation. Now it's on to the transition molding, which will cover the bottom of the case. And you know what that means, more templates. So many templates in this. This time I need the inverse or negative of the case. We can use the router to make this nesting template. I have a 1/4 inch flush trim bit in a table riding along the template for the case. This bit is removing a 1/4 inch of material, so to get a perfect nested template, we need to add back that 1/4 inch. We'll take this new template with that 1/4 inch missing and make another template from it. I use a washer to mark the rough offset so I can bandsaw away most of the waste. In the router I have a 1/2 inch bit and a 1 inch bushing. That combination gives me a 1/4 inch offset and essentially puts back the material that was removed from the curve with that 1/4 inch bit in the router table. Okay, so here is the completed template, and it fits fairly well. There's a little bit of a gap around the end, so the curve isn't exactly perfect, but I think it's gonna be close enough. This molding is gonna be narrow enough where I can force it to fully seat. I'm off by maybe a 32nd of an inch on either side, but through here it's nice and tight. So let's move forward and make some actual molding stock. Okay, let's see. Actually, not too bad. We've got a really nice fit along the top here, which is what really matters. And our reveal here is fairly consistent. It's a little bit off, but my transition frame isn't perfect either. So there'll be a little bit of fudging in there, but pretty darn good. So from here, I'm gonna fair this curve a little bit because it's a little bit bumpy from my work on the spindle sander. So real quick, fairing at the bench, and then we'll cut the profile into it, which will be interesting. There's not a whole lot of meat there. Okay, I think this is good to come off of the template, and we can see how it looks on the case. I'm only slightly worried about getting this off because I don't want to break this molding. Oh, that'd be so unfortunate. Maybe next time less CA glue. I was so worried about it coming off when I was routing that I went a little bit crazy with the glue. So now I pay for it. I think it's coming off okay though. Just be careful. Okay, on the front piece. Come on, there we go. This is cool. This is a pretty small thing, but this might be one of the coolest things I've ever made. It's just a piece of molding, but it is cool. Oh, that's so cool. Oh, look at this. Oh, that's awesome. That actually worked. I like it when some random plan I have that may work in theory actually works. Oh man, so let's see, what should we do next? I still have to attach this bottom piece. It's just in there temporarily right now. I want to do that before installing this, obviously. And we got to miter this thing still. So I don't know. Let's miter this. Let's do that. See how that goes before I get too far ahead of myself with all the excitement. So I think I'm going to try and attempt to miter this molding by hand. That seems a little less risky than trying to miter it with the saw and have it potentially be damaged. So in theory, this should be pretty easy to lay out. I'm going to mark the case, or where the case is onto here. So that's going to be one line. And then essentially I need to make an angle that connects the very corner of the case to the miter line in the transition frame. So if I come to this side and make a mark right along where this miter is. Now if I connect that mark along the bottom to this mark along the bottom, diagonal, that will be the exact miter angle of this piece. So I was going to shoot this, but who am I kidding? I'm not a hand tool woodworker. We'll get this set up here at the table saw. That actually went surprisingly well. There we go. That side's all set, so I'm just going to do the same thing on the other side. There we go, nicely mitered. How about something maybe easier? Let's make this molding next. Yeah, that should be quite a lot easier because it's, you know, straight. And I'll do the same thing to miter it. I'll just lay out the cut lines and chop them there at the table saw. Okay, so I just roughly got the miter cut on here. I haven't tweaked it yet, so it's not quite right yet. But this is where we start getting into the fun fudging time, because these obviously aren't going to match up at this corner, so we need to adjust the profile of the return molding to match what's going on at the miter. Down here it didn't matter as much because that wasn't, you know, we're not stepping back that far. It was a little off, but by the time I sanded the two profiles, they kind of crisped up just fine. This is going to be a little bit different. So this lower bead, I could just fudge this right at the corner and just kind of carve this material back and fade it in, and that wouldn't be too noticeable. But this second bead up here is going to be, you know, far more noticeable if I do that. So what I'm going to do is transfer the profile I'm going for onto the end grain and essentially just remove this and carve the profile into there by hand. There's not a whole lot there, so basically I just want to make sure that this little tiny fillet on top matches over here, and we can blend and shape the beads together right at the miter. So it's not a huge deal, but you know, we're 20 something inches long, so a good amount of molding to kind of finesse, but it shouldn't really be, you know, all that bad. Otherwise you'd end up having to like taper it, which I think will be really noticeable. So I have the moldings kind of all set to go. I do have to finalize the miter connection still. I'm going to wait to do that until the front molding is actually attached in case anything kind of shifts and moves as I'm installing it. But for now, I think we'll go ahead and start gluing things in. So I'm going to glue in the false bottom and the drawer supports for the bottom drawer, and then we can get the front molding attached to the case. And then from there, we can work on getting the return moldings finalized and installed. Okay, let's get this front molding applied. One thing I did is I put a little bit of a back bevel on here. That's going to get that material on the molding out of the way so we can make sure that we have a nice tight connection where the molding meets the top of the case here, or where the top of the molding meets the case, since that's actually an area we care about. If the molding isn't touching through its whole height, it doesn't matter. We just want it to touch perfectly along the top and of course down here along the bottom. So I'm gonna go through and really light glue. We don't need anything crazy on this. I have a few clamps here, and that should really be about it. I'm also using the side return moldings to make sure I get this thing lined up left to right perfectly, or at least perfectly back to where it was when I planned for where it was going to be. So that's the only other little thing. It's going to go pretty easy with the glue because I don't want any squeeze out. Okay, last little detail here is going to be the return molding. So now this is fixed in place. I can make any adjustments to the miter before I actually install it. So a few things on the prep. Before we install a molding onto here, this needs to be a finish ready surface. So the case side is finished sanded. So I don't have to worry about that ever again. On the stock, again, we have a back bevel on here because this molding is straight. That's pretty easy. I already did that when I ripped this from the main stock. That's just the blades tipped to like 3 degrees when I cut that. So the bottom is out of the way of the top. So when it comes in here, the bottom isn't going to make contact with the case, making sure the top makes contact with the case, making that nice and tight. Other thing that makes this a lot easier is on the ends. I have removed all the material that I do not care about. So everything except the very little bit of the edge of the profile is still there. The rest of the material is cut completely back. So as I'm doing my tweaking, all I'm doing is just adjusting that small band of material towards the outside of the molding. And when I throw this thing on here, I can see it's a little gappy. So it's a little gappy kind of down in here, up in here, but the middle is a little bit tight, which I think makes sense because there is some burning on here. So as I was making that cut, the piece probably shifted a little bit. Pretty easy fix though. I'm just going to adjust it with a little block with some sandpaper on it, just like a really simple, easy shooting board. So I have my molding here up on this piece of MDF just to get it up off the table a little bit. And I can just work this back and forth a little bit. There's not much material to remove. I'm just tweaking it so that the miter comes together super tight. So that's looking pretty good now. So let's prep this thing to go on. And you can see I have a little material to kind of blend together later. So the only thing this really needs is to be just chopped down to length. So I'll cut it so that it's the same length as the transition frame back here. And then it can be glued on. With this thing, we want the case to be able to float behind it. So I'm not going to glue it to the case except for right at the corner, just a few inches at the corner. And then it'll only be glued to the frame beneath it for the rest of the length. I'll use a little bit of super glue to make that process pretty easy so I don't have to worry about clamping it. And now right here, all this end grain is the material I need to remove in order to get these profiles to be perfect and crisp right at the corner. Okay, there is the completed corner. And, you probably wouldn't know that these two profiles didn't match up before. Well, I mean, you will, but just looking at this, it just kind of looks like it was supposed to be like that. So that takes care of the transition molding. So yeah, that was a lot. But just like everything else with this project, this simple wavy curve here on the front makes everything just a little bit more complicated. If you like these more in-depth woodworking videos, definitely check out my classes over in the Guild. I have over 150 videos spread over 9 classes over there. And this time we're going to highlight the waterfall tables. So not only is this a great introduction to live edge furniture work, you get to execute that amazing waterfall joint, which causes the grain to just seamlessly flow over the corner of that table just amazingly perfectly. Another thing we do in that series, which is kind of similar to what we did here for the base, is the glass inlay. So we go through the process of inlaying basically any shape you want. In this case, it was a custom piece of glass into the table. And that's just more of that router magic that we did, similar to here to make our negative template of the front of the case. And again, if you want to make your own serpentine chest of drawers, I do have a full set of plans over on my website that you can check out as well. So that's going to do it for this one. Next time we're going to do all the last little things, which there's a lot of them. We'll make the top and we'll do all the finishing and make the backboards, make the drawer bottoms, put the hardware on, all that kind of stuff. So thank you as always for watching. I greatly appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments on the serpentine chest of drawers or anything here in my shop, please feel free to leave me a comment. As always, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. And until next time, happy woodworking.